So let's talk about 1929, because that year the world really did change forever. Think of it like an economic earthquake that just erupted on Wall Street. The aftershocks, they brought the entire global economy to its knees, kicked off the Great Depression, and yeah, even helped set the stage for a world war. So how on earth did it all happen? Let's get into it.
And that really is the big question, isn't it? I mean, how did a decade of just insane prosperity, the Roaring Twenties, end in total global ruin? It's like the story of the greatest party ever thrown, a party that seemed like it would never ever end. But it turns out, it was always headed for a catastrophic hangover. To really get why it all came crashing down, you first have to understand the high. So, welcome to the Roaring Twenties. You gotta picture America right after World War I. It wasn't just a world power. It was pretty much the world power. I mean, Europe basically owed America money. And back home, things were booming. You had brand new tech like cars and radios just changing everything about daily life. Jobs were plentiful, people had money, and the confidence, man, the energy was just intoxicating. It really felt like the future was here, and it had a Made in America stamp on it.
Naturally, all that optimism spilled over into the stock market. Now, Wall Street used to be this exclusive playground for the super rich, right? Not anymore. Suddenly, it was the talk of the town. Middle-class families, even regular working folks, started to see stocks as their one-way ticket to the good life. Everybody wanted a piece of the dream.
But here's the catch, the fatal flaw. This whole dream, this nationwide gold rush, it was all built on an incredibly shaky foundation. And that foundation was debt.
So what was the magic trick that made all this possible for the average person? It was a little something called buying on margin. Okay, let's break it down. Say you wanted to buy a $10 share of stock. With margin, you only had to put down maybe $1 of your own cash. The other 9, you just borrow it from your broker. It felt like a miracle, right? A way to get in on the action with money you didn't even have?
But this thing was a total double-edged sword. If that $10 stock you bought went up to $11, boom, you just doubled your $1 investment. That's 100% profit. But, and this is a huge but, if that stock dropped to just $9, you didn't just lose your dollar. No, you were completely wiped out, and you still owed the broker money. It amplified everything, turning the stock market into a massive, high-stakes casino.
So why would so many people take this absolutely insane risk? Well, because the mantra you heard everywhere, from everyone, was that stocks could only go up. It was just a given. And this widespread, incredibly dangerous belief blinded an entire generation of investors to the cliff they were all sprinting towards. Now, this wasn't just about a bunch of naive investors. The whole system was rotten from the inside. There was basically zero regulation. Insider trading, using secret info to get rich, totally legal. The whole game could be rigged by savvy insiders. And to top it all off, the banking system itself was just thousands of tiny, fragile banks, all ready to be toppled like dominoes. This playbook right here, this shows you just how rigged the game really was. You had these savvy insiders, guys like Joe Kennedy. Yep, that Joe Kennedy, father of a future president, and they could play the public like a fiddle. It was simple, really. First, you buy up a big chunk of a company. Then, you get yourself interviewed talking up how great that company is. And what happens? All the small-time investors rush in, driving the price sky high. And right at the peak, you dump everything. You walk away with a massive profit, and all those regular folks are left holding the bag. And it gets worse. Some of the stuff people were pouring their life savings into was pure garbage. These things called trusts, or basically just bundles of bad companies, all packaged together to look shiny and valuable. It's actually eerily similar to the toxic financial products that caused the 2008 crisis. The whole thing was just a house of cards. Okay, so you've got this giant, unstable bubble. Now we get to see how the cracks start to spread. Every bubble has a pin. And for the Roaring Twenties, that pin came from a place no one expected. The government itself. So, the Federal Reserve is watching all of this completely out-of-control speculation. And they decide, okay, we got to do the responsible thing here and tap the brakes. So, they raised interest rates. The idea was to make borrowing more expensive and just cool the whole fever down. But in a system this fragile, this completely fueled by debt, tapping the brakes wasn't a gentle slowdown. Oh no. It was like hitting the eject button.
And that one move is what triggered the final catastrophic act. The fall itself was faster, harder, and way more devastating than anyone could have possibly imagined.
It all happened with terrifying speed. Black Thursday, October 24th, that was the first real tremor of panic.
By Black Monday, it was a full-blown earthquake. The market dropped almost 13% in one day. And then came Black Tuesday, October 29th. The floor just gave out. The market went into absolute freefall. Years of profits gone in a matter of hours.
The crash on Wall Street immediately became a crisis on Main Street. People panicked. They rushed to the banks to pull out their life savings, but those small, fragile banks, they didn't have the cash. The number of banks failing just skyrocketed, and millions of people saw their savings just vanish.
And this is what it led to. By 1933, 1 out of every 4 American workers was unemployed, 25%. This wasn't just a financial crisis anymore. This was a human catastrophe on a scale the country had never, ever seen before. And the crash, as terrible as it was just the beginning. It cast this long, dark shadow over the entire world, a shadow that we now call the Great Depression.
The human cost was just immense. People lost everything, their homes, their jobs, their dignity. Whole families had to migrate across the country, just desperate for any kind of work. And you have to remember, back then, there were no safety nets, no unemployment benefits, no Social Security. If you lost it all, you were completely on your own.
And instead of the world pulling together, it just fell apart. The U.S. passed this thing called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, which put huge taxes on imported goods, trying to protect American businesses. But it backfired big time. Other countries just hit back with their own tariffs, and global trade pretty much ground to a halt. The American Depression went global. And here's something that's always true. When economies collapse, people need someone to blame. In the U.S., that blame fell on the Republican Party, and it led to the election of FDR and his whole New Deal. But in Europe, wow, the same desperation took a much darker turn. It fueled the rise of these extremist movements. We're talking fascism with Hitler and Mussolini. So you see, the political fallout from the crash was every bit as huge as the economic one.
But you know, out of the ashes of this absolute disaster came a revolution, a complete rethinking of how our economy and our financial system should work, all designed to make sure something like this could never, ever happen again.
They passed these landmark reforms that created a totally new financial order. The SEC was created to finally police Wall Street and prevent fraud. The Glass-Steagall Act built a firewall between the risky investment banking and your everyday, regular banking. And a whole new economic theory, Keynesian economics, came along and argued that actually government should spend money to fight recessions. It was a massive change in thinking.
So, yeah, the '29 crash literally forced a complete rewrite of the rule book for finance. But here's the kicker. Over the decades, a lot of those rules, those safeguards, have been weakened or just gotten rid of altogether. And that leaves us with a really big, kind of scary question, doesn't it? Have we really learned the lessons from all this? Or are we maybe, just maybe, doomed to repeat it?